Last time, we talked about the four possible ways Russia could lose a war: defeat on the battlefield, strategic collapse, region failure, and system breakdown. Among these, the least damaging to China would be a battlefield or strategic defeat. Think about it. Just last month, Iran suffered a crushing blow in its 12-day conflict with Israel. It was a disaster, but did that defeat hurt China in any real way? Not really. As long as the leadership in Tehran stays in control, China has little to worry about. The same logic applies to Russia and the war in Ukraine. No matter how bad Russia's military situation gets, as long as the state doesn't collapse or change color politically, China's position remains stable. That's why Beijing has rushed to help Moscow even when Putin himself asks for support. The response seems distant. Because let's face it, whether Russia conquers Ukraine or not, that outcome doesn't bring China any direct gain. When Russia annexed Crimea, did it share anything tangible with China? Not a bit. Even if Russia swallows the Donbas region whole, China still gets nothing out of it. So when some voices suggested that China should send troops to Ukraine, that's pure madness. Why would China sacrifice its global standing just to protect Russian interests? Sometimes, what looks like patriotism is actually just blind devotion to another country. That said, there are scenarios where China and even the United States might intervene if Russia were to lose badly. To understand when and why, we need to look closer at what each type of Russian defeat could mean. First, if Russia loses on the battlefield, it would be humiliating, sure, but the regime might still hold together. Putin could tighten his grip, rule with an iron fist, and drag on for years. Facing sanctions, Moscow might try to negotiate a peace deal to ease the pressure. In this stage, China would likely call for ceasefires and align its message with Russia's. Next, imagine a strategic defeat. Russia's military is shattered, morale collapses, and the economy dives. Iranian forces push them out completely and demand reparations and justice. In that case, China would probably seize the opportunity to strengthen its energy ties with Russia, not out of charity, but to share in the spoils of a weakened Moscow. Meanwhile, the West would tighten sanctions to crush Russia's war potential, but not so hard that Russia falls entirely into China's arms. Washington and Brussels would strike a balance, punish Moscow, but keep it from becoming Beijing's dependent partner. If Putin remains in power, he might still find a way to survive. He knows neither China nor the US wants Russia fully allied with the other, so he could play both sides, offer energy or military cooperation to one side while bargaining with the other. Classic Putin maneuvering. Ukraine, for its part, would expose every bit of China-Russia cooperation to paint Beijing as complicit. The US would join in, reminding China of the reputational costs of standing by Moscow. Europe would try to make sure Putin has no room left to negotiate. Now, what if Putin's government itself falls? That's regime failure. This could unfold in several ways. One power could pass smoothly to another Putin-like figure from the same elite circle. That outcome would barely change China's position. Relations could continue as before. Two pro-Western forces could take over, turning Russia into a democracy. But for that to happen, several conditions must align. The old ruling group must lose control, the public must reject the war completely, the elites must agree to compromise for safety, and the West must lend a hand. If Russia truly became democratic and Western-leaning, the US and Europe would welcome it, but for China, that would be bad news. Without Russia as a buffer, China would face greater strategic pressure, and Western influence could seep deep into Central Asia, undermining projects like the Belt and Road Initiative. That's why, for China, the worst possible outcome isn't Russia splitting apart, it's a unified, pro-Western Russia standing shoulder to shoulder with the US and Europe. A fragmented Russia, on the other hand, might actually give China chances to step in, support friendly factions, and secure its own sphere of influence. And that brings us to the final type of failure: system collapse. If Putin falls, and chaos follows, regional wars rising in Chechnya, Siberia, the Far East, Russia could plunge into civil war. That's what happened when the Soviet Union fell in: economic meltdown, ethnic strife, and a dangerous spread of nuclear weapons. Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan all inherited nukes, and it took enormous US pressure to convince them to give them up. If modern Russia disintegrates, we could see the same pattern: nuclear weapons scattering, local wars erupting, instability spilling across borders. And this time, no one will be naive enough to sign another Budapest Memorandum. So yes, in China's eyes, the ideal Russia is one that struggles, adjusts, but survives. A long-term opponent is predictable. A collapse for Western-controlled Russia. That's chaos, and chaos is far harder to manage.